Hello and welcome to our podcast named Detours. This podcast embraces the unexpected twists and turns that shapes the journeys of our lives that God sends us down. I'm your host and fellow traveler, Mike. I'm here with my beautiful wife, Deb, and we invite you to join us on this exploration of uncharted territories we encounter along the way. So without further ado, let's dive into this episode. Hello, Detours family. Welcome to another episode. I am here with my beautiful wife, Deb.
Hi, guys.
And we are in the midst of season 3. I don't even know what episode number we are on, but we are here today with another episode. This whole season, we've kind of dedicated it to detours based on biblical stories and just kind of going through, different journeys that God has taken people down. And Deb and I were actually talking, and we wanted to take a detour on season 3, and we brought in a special guest, Ricki. Say hello, Ricki.
Hi, everyone.
And Ricki is from our church. We attend Calvary Chapel Surfside, and Ricki, you serve on what we would call, I guess, the hospitality team, and you
Bible
teach,
studies.
Yeah, women's Bible studies, all sorts of things over there, heavily involved at the church. And first and foremost, we appreciate that. Not enough people volunteer in church, if you ask me. So thank you for all that you do. But we thought you were an appropriate guest to bring in because we just finished a trilogy, if you will, on the prodigal son. It's actually 2 prodigal sons and their relationship with their father. And you've got some interesting things to say about, prodigals and father and so on and so forth. So, yeah, we thought we'd have you. So thank you so much for coming in.
Well, thank you for having me.
We're excited to talk about this story because, it's always an amazing thing to hear someone else's story and to see how God has shaped and moved their lives in such a way. And there was something that struck me so funny about your conversation that we had at church was for 60 years, you thought you were Italian. And come to find out, by 23andMe, you're not. And that led into a very interesting story that we're excited for you to share with the audience. And I'm sorry you're not Italian, but you do make good meatballs, according to you. And I look forward to tasting those.
Thank you. Yes. I tell a lot of people that I was Italian for 60 years. I went to bed one night. The Lord changed my DNA. I woke up Spanish Portuguese. So here I am.
So that begs a lot of questions. So where do we even begin in this story?
Well, I guess we have to go to the beginning when my grandmother put some doubt in my mind. This would be in 2007. I was taking care of her, and she came out of the bedroom and walked into the living room where I was sitting, and she got very close to me and looked at me, very sincere, and said, "I wonder who you look like. You don't look like any of us." I didn't say anything, but it started my mind rolling.
Sure.
So shortly after that, I had called my mom up, and I had asked her if it was possible that I had another father. And she was like, "Oh, no, I loved your father." And she was a little upset with me. So I kind of left it alone.
And your father had already passed, right?
Yes. He passed in 1977. So this would have been quite a few later, 10 years later, that my grandma and I had that conversation.
Now, let me ask you this, because something like that, if you felt very connected with your family, you would have thought like, well, maybe I just don't look like them. But that seed that was planted, was there ever a time where you really felt like, I don't know if I even fit in this family?
When somebody tells you something like that, you begin to look at yourself. Mm-hmm. So every time I looked in the mirror, well, not every time, but I would ask and say, "I wonder who you are."
Prior to this statement or after she said it?
After.
Okay. Yeah.
Because I always thought that I looked like my mom and my brother looked like my dad, the Italian. And so I was processing that for, I think, about 13 years.
Wow. Who do I look like? Am I fitting in this family? Did you feel like you didn't? I think that was the original question. Did you feel at some point you didn't kind of always jive or fit with the family?
Well, I could sense something, and I just don't think that I fit in with everybody the way the other kids did. I was kind of left out, and I don't know why.
And how many siblings do you have? So
Lots.
This was a loaded question. You have a lot of different siblings. I have one sister who's adopted. My brother, as we talked about last season, passed away, and my father was an only child. I
Very
have
small family.
Very small family. Deb is sort of the other end of the spectrum. So where do you fall? How many siblings do you have?
Well, I would be the oldest on my mom's side. My mom had 9 children, so I have 8 other siblings from her. And my dad, he had 3 children from my stepmom. And then from my biological father, he also has 8 children.
Wow. Okay.
So are you counting?
Yes. I started to, and then I just gave up. Yes. Okay. So a lot of kids. And so your grandmother, you're caring for her. How lucid was she when she said this? You said you were caring for her. Was she very, very into it? Like you didn't worry about her?
My grandma was very lucid. She had had a surgery. She had some cancer in her lung that was removed. But there was nothing wrong with her brain. And looking back, I think she was giving me some kind of a warning, some kind of knowledge about it, not knowing the future. But had I not known that, when I figured things out later on, it would have taken me by surprise.
Did you ever feel, you said you were around 17 years old when your father passed away? Is that what you said?
Yes.
Did you ever feel like you were missing anything, kind of going through, I would call, I guess, senior year of high school and college years and so on and so forth, and him not being around? Did you ever feel like that was missing?
You do. On certain events, you feel like it. But I had a stepdad, and then I got married very young, and so I didn't really think that I was missing out a whole lot.
You were busy having children of your own.
Yes, I was. And that kind of consumes you when you're raising your own family.
Got it. So your grandmother plants this seed of doubt, and we're going to kind of fast forward roughly 13 years.
Yes.
Right? So it's kind of the seed is planted, and then I think kind of like a lot of people, COVID hits, right? This is in 2020, or this is right before COVID hits, right?
Right.
This is in January of 2020. Your husband, who he claimed that he wanted to know whether or not you were from planet Earth, is his claim, right?
Yes, he told me that he always knew that I was an alien, and he wanted to find out what planet I was originally from.
That sounds like something you'd say.
Well, I already know you're from Venus, right? Men are from Mars, women are from Venus. So I already knew, but he's joking around saying, hey, let's go do this. But he said he was always kind of interested in that anyway, family histories and things like that, right? So this was nothing abnormal for him.
No, and he thought it would be fun.
So you go to 23andMe and walk me through this. You have to take a DNA test, so you have to go swab or spit in a test tube or something and mail it off, right?
Yes, he ordered the kits, and what you have to do is you have to spit in a tube. And it's not just a little bit. You're there for a few minutes. And I'm looking at him like, I don't know why I'm doing this. This is crazy. And he's like, oh, it'll be okay. It'll be okay. So we did it, and then we mailed it out. And I think it was January that I was genotyped. And
when you put that in the mailbox, did your grandma's words stick in your head? I wonder who you look like.
Not at all.
Huh.
What were you expecting to find with the results? Was there any expectation?
I was expecting to find out I was Italian.
There you go. I mean, she's been Italian 60 years.
Okay, so you expected nothing other than just interesting stuff of how family migrated over and so on and so forth. And so what happens next?
Well, when we get the test results back, it shows that I don't have any Italian blood in my body. None, not even a drop. And
Which is pretty remarkable in and of itself, to not have any traces. That's kind of rare.
that's a pretty definite no.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like God's divine answer. Like, no, honey, this is your answer.
But I had known the family history. I knew that my grandfather was from Sicily, and my brother looks Italian. And so I just thought that I looked like my mom and never really thought too much about it.
So you get the results and it's showing no Italian. What is your thought process at that point? Do you begin to question who you are? Do you begin to go, okay, let's go into problem solving mode and figure this out? What is your thought process at that point? Because this is something that I'll almost say you knew as fact for 60 years.
Right.
That just kind of got turned on its head. So did you have a bunch of anxiety? What was that
Shock?
like? Yeah.
Anxiety for sure, some shock. I think had I not known what my grandmother had told me earlier, it would have been devastating. But I told my husband, somebody lied.
Really? You thought somebody lied?
Somebody lied. And I said, we
So
got to figure
denial.
it out. Yeah. And
This was before or after you got the results?
this was
Yeah,
after we
after
got
she
the
got the
results.
results.
After you got the
because
results.
I've been told all my life I was Italian. Then I have a paper in front of me saying I'm not. And he opened up his test, and he actually has some Italian in him.
He was more Italian than you.
Yeah. So the Italian thing was a definite no. And so I started to look into it. And where do you begin? You know? So my sister.
Let me pause you there. Is there even a part of you that goes, I don't want to know?
No.
That you did. You were all in. I need to figure this out.
Oh, Ruth. Sorry. I almost called you Ruth. Ricki is a searcher of truth. So that would be almost impossible to ask her, did you not want to know?
At this point, you need to know. And so I started thinking about it and pacing around the house, and I decided to do a sibling DNA test with my sister. And she just did it to appease me, yeah. And so we went down and we did a blood test. And when the test came back, I actually had him overnighted. I needed to know, like, right now. And my husband goes, oh, this, you're crazy. And sure enough, when the test came back, it showed that I was not related to my sister at all.
Wow.
So these would be my birth certificate's father's children, which I grew up believing was my sister my whole entire life.
Wow.
And you even mentioned that once she saw the results, she said, Ricki, it doesn't matter. You're my sister. That's got to be, to me, that would be.
Reassuring?
Yeah, well, yeah, that's the response you want. I would want. I don't,
too.
that's certainly the response. After my brother passed away, we adopted my sister. And when we kind of had the conversation of, hey, as she got older, hey, you're adopted. Do you want to know anything about your birth parents? Her answer was no. You guys are my family. It's good to know. And we told her young, we weren't hiding anything, but she had a similar response where no, you're family.
When you grow up together, and you've done a life together, a DNA test isn't going to stop that.
Yep.
Amen.
Or break that,
Amen.
There's a lot of love there.
That's good.
Good. And you've got a good relationship with your sister.
Oh, yeah. And
Yeah,
we're
nice.
still very close today.
You
Good.
said that she took it a little harder than you even took it.
She didn't believe it at all. She thought that I was wrong, and she believed that I was wrong. So it was, I think, hurtful to her if you weigh it all out. We didn't spend too much time on that. We just knew that we would continue to go on and be sisters.
So, you put on your Columbo hat at this point, and you're trying to figure out who you are, where you came from, all of this stuff. So that the DNA test was sort of the first domino to fall. So what's the next domino?
Well, being that my mom had passed away 2 years before this, I started calling relatives that knew her. I had a cousin that lived down in not too far from me, about 30 minutes. I called her up and I talked to her about it. And I asked her, I said, who was my mom dating at that time? And I didn't really tell her why. I was just kind of asking questions. And this is 60 years later, so her memory wasn't that good. And she goes, I don't really know. She goes, all I've ever known is your dad, my birth certificate father. So I get on the 23andMe page, and I start looking at some relatives. I have a first cousin that I've never met. I know all my first cousins. We grew up together, and here's his name. So I sent him a message, and he responds. And I said, how is it that I don't know you? Are you from Pueblo, Colorado? That's where I was born. And do you know the Pinos? And he wrote me back and he said, no, I don't know the Pinos, but my mom's maiden name is Reed. And then when he told me that, I knew who my father was. And I just needed to verify it. And I asked him for his phone number, and he gave it to me. This was on January 18th, and I called him. And
you called the biological father?
Yes.
Okay.
And I said, hi, Ben, how are you doing? And he's like, hi. He said, I was just getting ready to send your mom an email. And I said, oh, Ben, I said, I'm so sorry. I said, I should have called you and let you know that my mom passed away 2 years ago. And by the way, I think I'm your daughter.
Oh,
My goodness.
wow.
That's quite the bomb to drop. What are you feeling anxiety getting ready to call this man, wondering how is he going to respond? Is he going to answer the phone? What's going through your head before you even pick up the phone?
Nothing. I just wanted to let him know what I knew. And
Not nervous at all?
no, I kind of got tunnel vision. It's like, okay, because for 18 days, it had upset my whole world. And thank the Lord, he didn't make me wait very long. I mean, some people wait years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he was very gracious. And I knew that he was a Christian and his wife was a Christian because I had met them probably about 5 years before that. He was driving through Colorado Springs where I lived, and he wanted to give my mom some CDs and some books of his ministry. And I'd met him in a parking lot and said hi to him. How are you doing? Got the CDs and kind of went on my way. Really didn't mean anything to me. And in the phone call, though, I said, do you remember that? Do you remember meeting me? And he goes, yeah, I thought you looked familiar.
That'd be the understatement of the year 2020.
Century.
Yeah.
Sure.
So, okay. See, what is his response? I mean, you just drop a bomb on this guy. What is his response?
He said that's entirely possible.
Wow.
Right off the bat.
Yes.
Doesn't hide anything.
Yes.
And do you guys talk for a while? Do you hang up the phone because there's a lot for both of you to process? Are you external processors? What happens at that point?
I think he was a little shaken. He did want to hang up, and he did say he would call me back. And I think back, and had I realized his age, because at this point he's 85, I would not have done it like that. But I was anxious and I wanted to know. And so I just kind of blurted it out. And then I waited patiently for him to call me back.
And he did come around?
He did. He sent me a text first. And I saved the text. And
It's a sweet text.
It is, and it made me cry. I was in church when I read it.
Do you want to read it?
I will in a second.
Okay.
He had, while I was in church, I was reading this and I started crying. And then I wanted to immediately leave because I didn't want anybody to see me crying. Because when you're crying in church, people are going to come up to you. They're going to say,
What's wrong?
Are you okay? What would I have said?
Yeah. Was this, where were you? Were you at Surfside at this point?
No, I was still in Colorado Springs.
You're still there.
At
Okay.
my home church.
Okay. Got it. So you're standing, this is before or after service?
It was right before service. They were still in worship.
Do you even remember the sermon that was taught that day? Is that one of those things that's a God moment that God drops a bomb and then has an amazing sermon afterwards? Was it tunnel vision where all you could do is reread that text? Like, talk to me about the next hour or two right after that.
So I left the service that were in the main sanctuary, and I went out into the foyer, and I decided to leave because I was overwhelmed. And my dad's text was one of love, and he told me that he had to search the archives of his brain, and it was just very touching, and he made me feel loved right from the beginning, and how he kind of explained things touched my heart. And I'm not a very emotional person, but that day the emotions were high, and I felt overwhelmed, and I just needed some time to myself.
So Deb and I process very differently. Deb wants to talk about things immediately. That's how she processes information. For me, I internalize it. Leave me alone. Give me my space. Let me think about this, and I'll get back to you in an hour, in a day, in a few days, whatever it may be. What kind of process, especially something like this, processing something like, I don't know, or you've got, your transmission goes out in your car and you got to process, do I fix the transmission or buy a new car? That's not even in the realm of where you're at. So how is the processing working for something like this?
Well, I definitely am a type of person that I need to take some time and think about it.
Okay, so you're like me. Yeah.
Internal processor for sure.
And I sat in the parking lot for a long time, and I was just listening to worship music, and I love to ponder things, and this gave me a lot to ponder. So I started thinking about what my grandma had told me, and then the DNA test, and what am I going to do next? Those kind of things.
How do you, because you, in kind of prepping for all this, you've mentioned that you believe your grandmother's statement 13 years later was a little bit of protection, if you will, from God, where he placed that seed, that small seed of doubt, and you had 13 years to ponder. You feel that God was protecting you there?
Absolutely. Because I have pictures with my mom and my dad together. My mom is pregnant and my dad's with her. His name is on my birth certificate. Why would I doubt that? I mean, kids sometimes don't look like other kids,
Right.
depending on just whatever. There's a lot of us and we all look a little different.
Sure.
So I do believe that was a gift from the Lord, that what he was going to reveal to me was going to be kind of shocking. So that was his way of loving me, and his grace was upon me during that time.
Yeah, this is a heck of a detour to go down. So you're sitting in the church parking lot processing. Are you having conversation with God? Is it just more meditation on what was said in the text message? Was it meditation on the worship music that you were listening to?
I probably was in a trance. I read the text over and over again because it was a lot of information to receive. And my mind at this point is going 100 miles an hour. And I was having trouble just letting it absorb.
Sure.
So I had to calm myself down and read through it. Then I went home to share that with my husband.
What was his thoughts?
Disbelief.
Oh, yeah?
Because?
Yeah. Why?
You know, I don't know. I've never asked him, but he was like, that can't be Ricki. He says, you look like your grandma. And I'm
But
like,
you bought me the 23andMe.
I don't look like my grandma. She was German with blue eyes. And
Yeah.
we don't have any similarities. He goes, but you have her facial expressions.
Well,
And I said, that's probably true.
60 years worth of being in a
Yeah,
family, you're going to pick
living.
up traits.
And my grandma raised me and my brother. I was 3 when she took us, and I was 11 when I went to go live with my dad.
So there's a lot going on here. And so you're 60-ish years old when you find out who your biological father is. You get the confirmation from him via text message. When do you actually talk to him?
Well, he called me 3 days later.
3
Around
days
3
after
days
the text?
After I had called him.
Okay, so
Yeah.
and the text message comes how soon?
I think it was the next day.
Okay.
Would you like me to read that?
Yeah, please,
Yeah,
if
we
you want
love
to.
that.
He says, good morning. This is Ben and probably your father texting you.
Wow.
Your gracious call last night caused me to search the archives of my past. I asked myself, why over 60 years later? When I was paroled in 1963, I asked your mom that question. She did not answer me. I really don't think she knew. I think I seen her twice just to talk. 4 years in prison seeking Jesus changed my way of thinking. I was not looking for the pleasure. And it cuts off. Of a woman. I said that someday I would be looking for a wife. She was still married to Fat Man. That was my dad, his nickname. When I dropped her off and I saw that look in her eye, and I knew I would not see her again.
Wow.
That would be an emotional text message to get right before church. I think I would sit in the car and listen to worship music too.
Wow. I love that he responded. To me, that's an act of grace, after you guys talked. And I know that he called you 3 days later, but that 3 days could have been very painful in the waiting process. And I think a lot of us endure the waiting, and we don't always endure it well. But you had a lot of time to process over the years, so maybe you would have done better than maybe I would have in that situation. But he texted you just to let you know, like, it's okay, daughter. Like, how sweet is that? And your biological father sounds like a remarkable man. Yeah, can you tell us a little bit about who he is?
Yeah, you mentioned in the text message 4 years in prison, right?
So I would have had to been conceived in March. He went to prison in May. I was born in November. He did serve 4 years, and when he got out, he did contact my mom. And like he said, she didn't answer his question. So he went on with his life. But I think that his love for my mom gave him a love for me, if that makes sense.
Of course.
Totally.
And I think that's why he responded the way he did in his text. At that point, I had peace. Before that, I was kind of restless, kind of searching to figure out who he was. I did ask him if he would do a DNA test because at this point I wanted to know for sure. And at this point, I had made up my mind that nobody else would be acceptable.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
So your dad, he had a detour right after you were conceived. He goes into prison, and coming out of prison, he's a completely different man, right?
Yes, because he gave his life to the Lord.
So in prison, he was in prison for 4 years. What did he go to prison for?
He didn't really explain that to me.
Okay.
So I don't know for sure. But he told me he was kind of did some bad things.
Gotcha. And so was there like a prison ministry or something where like the church would send people down to the prison and minister to people? How does that happen? Or is he locked in a cell with a Bible and gets saved? Do you have any inkling there?
He said he had a vision,
Wow.
and the Lord revealed himself to him. And he began to study the Bible and to get to know the Lord. And what he chose to do then was learn the 10 Commandments, and chose to live the best he could with the Lord. My father has always told me that he's a born-again Catholic, so that tells me that he had a Catholic background. And when he came to know the Lord, and he believes that he was called to do prison ministry in California on the Catholic side of the prison, which he did do for, was it 50?
You said 48 years.
48 years, yeah.
Wow.
Until COVID hit, and then it was canceled. And but he remained faithful to the Lord all that time.
So he's a completely different man coming out of prison. Goes to contact your mom. She really doesn't respond, right?
Correct.
And then fast forward, whatever it was, 50 years, and all of a sudden he gets a phone call. Just the fact that he responded the way he did speaks volumes to the change that happened during prison and, of course, all the years after prison.
Gracious, very gracious.
Yeah, I mean, I think of the study we just came out of the prodigal sons and just the heart of the father.
Yeah, he was tender.
He was very tender, very compassionate. And it sounds like, truthfully, in a way, you hit a little bit of a lottery here with just the way he reacted. I'm sure anyone can understand the shock, but just the fact that both your biological father and God had the mercy to send you a text message after only 24 hours. That's a lot to process in 24 hours. And you're back on the phone with this man 2 days later.
We spoke on the phone for probably over 2 hours. He shared his story with me. He shared with me about his wife and his children. And he asked me to forgive him for not being there. And my response was, there's nothing to forgive. How can I forgive? I mean, how can I be angry at you for something that you never knew about? And I was getting ready to go to Israel, and I was excited about that. I remember sharing that with him. He wanted to go with me, but he wasn't able to. But he quickly planned a trip to Colorado and came to visit me.
Wow.
So, looking back, we've already mentioned, God gifting you that doubt, 13 years, gave you time to process. Like, we serve a God of detail. Deb and I often talk about that just in our own stories, stories with my brother. What kinds of details throughout all of this prove to you that God was with you during that detour?
I believe he was growing me in himself. When I was 39, I gave my life back to Christ because I knew him as a child and then kind of wandered off. And as I was growing in him, I believe that he was pleased with me and that my father was a blessing. And he knows when the time is right. And 60 years is a long time. And but it wasn't a bad 60 years. I didn't miss something I didn't know that I had. But once I knew that I had him and I wanted to get to know him and enjoy him. I was very grateful that the Lord allowed it while he was still alive. Because
Yes.
had he passed, would have been very hard for me, because I wouldn't have been able to answer all the questions and the things in his life that I just didn't know. I think that unknowing at that point would have been hard. And the Lord's love for me and for him brought us together. And at that point, we kind of didn't question it anymore and just kind of picked up and got to know each other.
And just that in and of itself is pretty amazing. You know, to think that you just kind of pick up, as if it's my best friend, ironically, lives in Colorado. And part of the reason he's my best friend is because we can go months without talking, and we pick up the phone and we pick up right where we left off. And it's an easy friendship because of that. And it sounds like you guys took that to a whole different level. 60 years of not knowing one another, and you just kind of pick up going, hey, I met you in a parking lot that one time. You remember that? And it develops into this whole friendship, and that's amazing.
There must have been so many questions you had for one another, just trying to catch up on 60 years worth of time.
I don't think we had a lot of questions. He was pretty thorough in his testimony that he shared with me.
Okay.
And I shared mine with him. And the funny thing is, I lived in Huntington Park, California, during the time that he was there. And he was only miles away from me.
Wow.
But it wasn't the Lord's time yet.
Wow.
And I wonder if we passed each other on the highway or something. I know that he had contact with my mom during that time, and I spoke with him in the phone because he was kind of a legend in our family. Everybody kind of loved him, and
because he kept in touch, like they were able to keep in touch, and your
your
family knew him.
They kept in touch, and they were friends.
Okay.
And his wife ministered to my mom as well.
Oh.
So he had a very loving wife, and information like this can tear a family apart, and it didn't. It was a blessing, and I believe it was a blessing for him, and I believe that his wife loved him, and she was very gracious with him.
Well, not just that, but he had a ministry, the
Yes.
prison ministry. So the fact that new information is coming out about a child 60 years earlier, he could have easily just reacted negatively because he felt his ministry was threatened, but he didn't.
He told me that he said, "You are my daughter, and I'm not going to be ashamed of you." And so he arrived in Colorado on February 14th, and I met him and his sister at a gas station and picked him up and brought him to my house. And he did not know how to unlock the 23andMe because we did a DNA test, and I was anxious to get it done. So when he came over, my husband put it in and unlocked it, and sure enough, it showed that I was his daughter and he was my father. And he reaches his hand across the table and he goes, "Congratulations."
Nice. So he's got a little bit of spunk to him.
Yeah, he does. And I thought, wow, that's kind of neat, And my daughter just happened to come by because there was a wrestling tournament, and she got to meet him, and he just picked up the family like it was always his.
Wow. What a man.
And he's a man that loves the Lord. Mm-hmm. And I always tell him, I said, "Dad, you love well." Because you can walk through life and not feel really loved. And I had a lot of rejection in my life, and to get to know him and just to recognize that love and to be able to feel it, I was confident in it, if that makes sense.
God, it does. It's beautiful.
And I can't help but think of like Job, how he goes through a trial and he loses his children, and he gets the double blessing at the end. I mean, talk to me just about in the few years that he's been in your life. How has just his presence blessed you?
You know, it's been really wonderful. He had told me that he always prayed over his daughters, and he prayed that they would be in ministry. I believe that his prayers covered me all of my life, even though he didn't know that I was his. The Lord did, and the Lord allowed his prayers over me as well. And I believe those prayers saw me through a lot of things. And when I gave my life to the Lord, that was it for me. I would just went full force with the Lord. So we did it together. We'd like to take road trips together. He introduced me to one of his daughters. Her name is Shirlene, and she lives in Nevada. So after his time in Colorado, we planned a trip to Ely, Nevada, and I picked him up in Utah, and then we drove to meet my sister, and she was so gracious. Her and I got along great.
Oh.
And we were there, I don't know, 3 or 4 days, and got to know her and got to know a little bit about her family, and met her daughter.
How amazing.
And everybody was so kind. And so we broke some bread and had some fellowship. And then my dad and I drove to Grand Junction, where he met my daughter and her kids. And then I drove to Denver, and then to Walsenburg, where I met some of his family. And everybody was so loving and so kind. There was no questions. Oh, you're Ben's daughter. Come on in. Hello. Are you hungry? Type of thing. I felt very welcomed. And when he went back to California, he made several more trips to Colorado to visit with us. So we grew close during that time. My 2 oldest sons were in prison, and being that he was in prison ministry, he wanted to meet them. So we got him approved on their visiting lists. And on one trip, I think we put a few thousand miles on the car, driving from one prison to the next. And he went in, he ministered to them, he ministered to their friends. And when my oldest son got out, he came down again to meet him and spend time with him.
Wow.
They played handball together.
Handball?
Yes. My dad loves to play handball.
How old is your dad?
At this point, he was probably 86.
I'm impressed.
And he was pretty good. The boys played with him for quite some time. He went to the gym with me. We ran, and we did whatever it was we were doing at the gym. It was kind of fun. And
how cool.
Then we went to the mall, and we had our feet massaged, and those kind of things.
Like any father-daughter would do.
So you kind of get to know him and get to do some fun things and have good meals together and pray together. And one thing I learned about him is he kept a little notepad in his pocket, and he wrote everything down. And at night he would pray about it. He's very faithful. He fasts every Thursday, so he does not have anything to eat until dinner time. And he's done this every week, probably I don't really know how many years, but I'd imagine it's probably been a lot of years. And
what a great spiritual discipline. I like the thing in the pocket. I think that's something that really keeps you looking for an opportunity to intercede for people. How precious.
And he's faithful. I happened to knock on the door one night, and I was going to tell him something, and he had the little notepad in front of him, and he was on his knees praying. And I think that's something that he does every day. And he believes that the Lord brought him to me to help me with my children.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that we're going to get it. Well, let's save that for the next episode, because the prodigal, we're talking about the father in the equation right now, but you definitely have some things to say about the prodigal sons. But that's a whole episode, at least in and of itself. So, God is always trying to turn us into more and more of an image of his son. How has he done that? What has he shown you during this whole process that's taken? I guess the focus of it has been the last 5 years or so, but it was 60 plus years. How do you see God turning you more and more into his image through a trial and a detour like this?
He gave me my identity because the identity I had before was false. And even though I didn't know it, it was knowing that who my biological father was and having the love of him that gave me confidence and just grew me in the Lord. I don't know, in such a beautiful way that gave me the strength to continue on with my family and the things that they need. And so we teamed up together. So whenever we went together, it was always ministry, prayer, and then we would rejoice. And I think I sent you a silly picture. And before that picture, there were a lot of tears. And it was pretty heavy because we were talking some serious stuff about the sin that my son was in. And after they repented, they prayed and they received the Lord. We just ate some food and took some silly pictures, and then off me and my dad went to the next adventure. And so it was fun. And
it's interesting that it's more or less, antichrist doesn't mean against Christ, it means instead of Christ. So just the way that you phrase that answer of you found your identity, it is like being lost and then all of a sudden being found, because you find who your father is. The counterfeit is no longer there in the equation, and he's just blessing you with all this time. And someone that's 85 that still wants to go on road trips
and play handball
and go to prison and minister to your kids. That's incredible. That's absolutely incredible.
Godly endurance.
Yeah.
Yeah. And my birth certificate father, he died when I was 17. So I was many, many years without a father and an earthly father. And the Lord gave me a second chance at that. And not only did he give me a second chance, he gave me a man that loved him and knew how to love well. And so he's only brought positive to my life. And I can rejoice in knowing who I am now. And I'm very proud that he's a minister and that he shares the gospel. He's done a lot of mission trips in Mexico, and he's strong in his faith. When we were driving back from Nevada, he was starting to get sick, and I thought he had COVID, and his voice was changing. He was running a fever, and he opened up his Bible and he started praying. And I believe he prayed that COVID away, because by the time we got where we were going 6 hours later, he was fine. And the next morning we woke up and he met my daughter and my granddaughter. And I wasn't going to let him if I thought he had COVID, because at that point we didn't know what it was. But it was fine. And
glory be to God.
When we do road trips together, we listen to the Bible. He ministers to me. We do praise and worship. We stop at gas stations. I put gas in the car and he washes all the windows. And we get a cup of coffee or a cup of hot chocolate. And it's beautiful. It's something I never had. And so I just feel the love of the Lord upon me and giving him to me as a gift. And I know that for some people it's not a gift, but for me it's a gift.
A double blessing,
Yeah, again,
you know?
yep, that double blessing.
Just all those years longing probably to have that, the love of a father, an earthly father. 17's a young age to lose your dad. And just all the events that took place from 17 to 60 is you want to have a father figure there. And
You do.
God gives you this man who is passionately in love with him and is serving him. And he embraces you. He embraces your children. You get to meet his family. It's like you get a whole nother family and a whole nother shot at family. That's just remarkable. Remarkable.
What impresses me about him is that he's purposeful. Like, he'll call me and we'll pray. And he has each one of my kids' phone numbers, so he purposely stays in contact with them.
Oh, love that.
There's quite a few kids. I imagine he has a lot of grandkids of his own from his children, from his present wife, and then to get to know mine. We're not a small family either, and he has purposely spent time with them, met with them, prayed with them, and keeps in touch with them. And
it's a picture of God's compassion. Yeah. You said, and mistake me, if I'm mistaken, please correct me, that he texts you good night every evening?
No, I send him a Bible verse every day.
Okay.
And he will usually text me back. He'll counter with another Bible verse. And he loves to sing the Psalms. So if I call him up and I said, "Hey, Dad, can you sing Psalms 83?" And then he'll start singing it. And next day he'll send me the text with the words that he's singing it. And they'll say, "Well, maybe this doesn't fit like this and we should do it like this,
Oh.
And I stay in contact with him regularly, and not every day, almost 3 or 4 times a week. And we talk on the phone, and he's always there if I need to call him for prayer. And he loves my husband and thinks he's a good guy, and he has spent time with him too. And even my sister, that was kind of shocked when she found out. She came over to the house and she was like quizzing him, like...
Really?
I had to say, "Sister, stop,"
Yeah, but that's legit. I got a few questions for you.
Yeah.
Hold on a second. Yeah, I could
and
see that
she's-
response.
She's Italian.
Protective. Okay,
Yeah,
there you
that's
go.
the Italian in her.
Yeah. So, and he answered all her questions with grace. And recently, she lost her husband due to COVID, and he makes a point to go to her house and spend time with her.
Wow.
When he's in Colorado. I mean, he really shows the love of Christ to everybody that he encounters. My sister from my mom's side, she recently got married in Arizona, and he went to her wedding. But he knew her because when he would travel from California to Colorado, him and his wife would spend the night at her house. So he had a relationship with her. And so he went to her wedding and blessed them. And it's like he was always part of the family. I was just the missing piece.
Wow.
And when the Lord connected us, everybody was kind of connected in a very peaceful, loving way.
Such a great story.
Yeah. So how would you, if we had to kind of sum up everything, like for when my brother passed, the Bible verse and the word that we focused on was a very brief phrase from the book of Colossians: "Let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts." And that key word for us during that trial was peace. Is there a verse? Is there a word? Is there how do you sum up this whole story now that you're looking back on it?
Romans 8:28.
That is a very well-known verse.
Yep.
And
What is it?
all things work together.
together for good
Yep.
to those who love him and are called according to his purpose.
And even though you would sit there and maybe say, "My goodness, I find out who my dad is at age 60," that's so late, God would say, "It was actually right on time."
Yep.
He's right on time every time. And you could very easily be bitter or upset or anxious or all these things, and you're just not. And it's such a beautiful picture to me of the peace of Christ, how much you trust him, his timing. And even though you didn't ask for any of this, it's turned into such a beautiful picture. Just this relationship that you have with this man, and the relationship that both of you have with God is just wonderful. But yeah, I think, we've talked about a few things. I think we're going to come back in the next episode and talk about the detours of having prodigals. It's something that's near and dear to Deb and I, to our hearts. As we've talked about, Deb's son is a prodigal that we're praying for pretty hard. And you and I were part of a prayer group on Monday mornings, early Monday mornings for a while. And so we prayed for each other's kids, and I'd love for you to come back and fill in the audience on all that side of the story of your life, if you don't mind coming back.
I would love to.
So why don't we pick up with that in the next episode? But thank you so much, Ricki, for coming here. We appreciate it. This is an amazing story. We hope it gives you guys, someone out there, hope of perseverance, just knowing that we serve a God of peace. It's an amazing story. So thank you for coming and sharing and being vulnerable.
Thank you.
We
for
really
having
appreciate it.
Yes, and as always, Deb, you're an amazing host on the show as well. Thank you so much. We're lucky that we get to do this together.
Oh, totally blessed.
But
Thank you, babe.
Yes, absolutely. All right, guys, we will be back in the next episode with Ricki once again. But for now, thank you so much for joining us. We will see you next time.
Bye, guys. Thanks for listening to Detours. For more content, you can find us on Spirit FM Radio, Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Play, or on our website at detours.life. To view my writings or to contact me for public speaking engagements, visit my website at debmarsalisi.com.